Hello, Christopher.
Hello.
How
Hello.
are you?
I'm great. It's 10:22 p.m. on a Friday, and
Yeah,
there's nowhere I'd rather be.
all right. So you're where are you though?
I'm in my apartment
What's
in
what city?
Kazakhstan, Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Okay. So it's February 21st, Friday. We now have 12 people on with us, and we're very grateful to our 12 faithful who are really making us feel we've got to up our game a little bit. John B
Got to
says,
keep
good
going.
afternoon. And this is Dave Charette. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Greetings from Connecticut. John B says, good afternoon. I'm not sure where John B is, but great to see you again, John. There are
Well, we,
so many things to discuss, Chris.
uh,
And what,
we're a little late today because we have been busy with a lot of different things, and one of those was this issue of the magazine.
inside the Vatican. And
Correct.
there's a glare on my light, so on my glasses, so I take those off.
So
Um,
yeah, it's just so many things have been happening.
yeah,
This
let's
and
enumerate the things happening, and let's try to take a global view since I'm in the Western Hemisphere. I'm actually not in Rome right now. And each minute I'm thinking of getting a plane ticket and landing in Rome and following these events. But this morning they say the Pope is feeling a little better. You and I both have met the Pope, and we've both been appreciative of him and also perplexed by him at times. So I think we have a very fair and very profound understanding of the things that he's done and not done, the issues he's faced and not faced. But certainly for every human being in the moments when they are on the sickness and the door of death, uh, we pray for them.
yeah, well, what's your gut feeling?
I think right now, I still think he'll recover. That's why don't listen to what I say, but watch what I do. I'm not actually. What I'm doing here is organizing many things in the United States that have to be done. We have an office, we run pilgrimages, and also my health in some ways gets better here because I take long walks in the woods. And
Mm,
in Rome, I can get out to the park, but somehow Rome is always
it's the
um,
diet.
it's a diet.
It's the breakfast.
The breakfast.
Yeah. I mean, Italian food is great, but they can't do breakfast.
So I get my cornetto, and then
It's just
I've got
sugar. Breakfast is just sugar with some caffeine
yeah. So
and
I use
dairy
I
and
put
milk.
the cornetto with a cappuccino, and then
Yeah,
sometimes
they've had 4,000 years of civilization and they never figured out how to do a proper breakfast.
oh man, okay. So I must remind viewers that you were born in the Eternal City in Rome. So in some way, you are a Roman, much more so than I am.
Yeah, well, I was watching some uh video of some YouTuber about posting about what it's like to live in Rome, and I was just thinking that it's not like really it's not really my home or your home, but it did kind of become like a second home in some way. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so uh I think that yeah, it would be good to look into the citizenship at some point too.
Yeah, because we were Americans and we got American citizenship for you at the embassy when you were born.
Yeah,
And we
we may
didn't,
need to. Yeah, no,
yeah,
go ahead.
we never got the Italian citizenship ourselves, nor did we get it for you
Yeah,
or or your brother. And this was a mistake, I think.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it would. I don't know if it would have been possible to do. I think there was always going to have to be like some, like without growing up in Italy and serving in some. I don't know if it was like army service or like a national service for a year. You do have to do something to get the citizenship if you don't have the uh what do they call it, the jus sanguinis, the blood,
The
by
law.
blood. Yeah,
And
with literally law of the blood, but you know, a blood relative as like your parent or grandparent as an Italian citizen. And that's why there are Americans that it just is a bit frustrating to be in the airport, you know, which I've been a few times, like in going into Italy, hearing some Americans go in, whipping out their nice, fresh Italian passport and going through the line, speaking English to all of the people as they, you know, all the carabinieri at the, you know, checking them in, just because they had one Italian grandparent.
mm,
And, you know, I feel like certainly you, not even like forget me, like certainly you, after like all of the time you've spent learning Italian, also you should definitely have some type of, you know,
all right.
official
So let's take. I mean,
presence.
I always had a certain lack of interest in worldly matters of this type.
Yeah.
I
Well,
didn't,
yeah.
my citizenship was even this, I better not say this, but all earthly citizenship seemed to me to pale into insignificance compared to the citizenship from through the church in this community which spans space and time into eternity, into heaven, which we have been given the hope of through the resurrection. And otherwise, I don't see any other comparable hope in this world, no matter if they have AI and vitamins to live 10,000 years way. Some people are talking this way, you know, right now,
Mhm.
that they can just about taste and grab 10,000 years on this earth. And I just imagine, you know, 70 is enough. And the way we live in this body needs to be transcended. I, my favorite phrase: "Man is not himself unless he transcends himself," which is a
Mhm.
paradox. We can't comprehend that, but we can sort of accept it. And that's why we don't feel at home in this world or in space and time, because we have kind of an eternal dimension or element, and that is part and parcel of all that we have talked about and discussed, you and I, in this podcast and for many years. It's what Solzhenitsyn was talking about. It's what Pope Benedict always talked about, John Paul II, and Francis too. Francis,
Mhm.
of course, has presented us with a more complex picture, at least from our perspective, than Benedict and John Paul. All three of whom we knew, and John Paul picked you up and hugged you when we went to a Friday night rosary in the Vatican, and he was a young man. It was probably late in 1989. You were just a few months old. You were born in the summer of '89, and Benedict didn't pick you up as Pope, but he picked you up when he was Joseph Ratzinger in St. Peter's
Mhm.
Square. When you were chasing the pigeons, you used to follow the lines
Yeah.
around the
Yep.
obelisk, which are set in white marble over against the dark cobblestones, and you would race around with you had blonde curly hair in those days and a full head of hair.
You mean as I do, as I still do?
But
Ah,
you're a little concerned. You told me that you're receding a bit.
yes, of course. I seem to have been receding for about a decade now, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know what that is from. I'm starting to as well. But
Oh man. Yeah, but so I guess you're saying that you felt like you don't feel so at home anywhere, maybe. Is that what you're saying?
well, I think this. This is
Where's
actually,
home? Where's home for you?
in a way, St. Paul said, "In this world we have no lasting habitation." Epistle to the Hebrews.
Where do
Um,
you feel? But like, okay, I
so no,
okay.
so what?
But
They
where do you
walk
feel at home?
everywhere.
Hmm.
I do. Sometimes in Rome, I think this is my city, and I draw my life and my joy from all the beauty. But there's also, of course, many problems in Rome. But and then you and I more or less grew up in Annapolis, Maryland.
Well, not you, but
No, but
yeah.
we wanted to have a place near Washington, so when I would go back and forth between Rome and America, I could go over to the Bishops' Conference or Catholic University. And
Hmm.
so we settled down there, and you grew up really as an American, not an Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
But still, now with the new political alignment, we may need to have a new citizenship just to go visit Europe in a few years.
okay. So we're beginning to get to the news of the day, which is overwhelming. I myself
We're going
have
to
to
need a
start.
visa. We're going to need a visa to go to Italy.
Well, they say
They're going
that the Americans may need visas to go to Europe in the future, and so I haven't had to have one really ever to go into
Yeah.
Italy. No, never. Just get on the plane and go.
Yeah.
And we have that little apartment on the Janiculum Hill,
Yeah.
uh, where uh, which you know so well.
Yeah.
Um, so the Pope has been sick. He's been in the hospital. He's a little better today. Uh, I look at these recent popes, and all of them um, got sick at different times or were sick even for the final years of their pontificate. John Paul II, after about the year 2000, he was always sick. Never
Hmm.
was the strength and force of his early years. And there were speculations then that he might resign. And then the last months of his life, he was difficulty even speaking. And it was a pitiful sight in the sense that it drew our pity, which is actually a good thing. We should pity the mortal men, each other and him,
Hmm.
because as Paul said, we have here no lasting habitation. And Paul VI was sick the last months of his life. John Paul II followed John Paul I, who was Pope only for 33 days, and may or may not have been sick in the days
Which
before he.
means,
There's a mystery. Um,
enlighten us.
well, this is the subject of often my conversation with Father Charles Murr, good friend now. Years ago, I went to see Cardinal Gagnon, and Charles Murr was a friend of Gagnon when he was a young man in the 1970s in Rome, and actually drove. He must have been 28 or 30 years old when he drove Cardinal Gagnon into the Vatican on 3 different occasions, carrying a report that Gagnon had been asked to prepare on possible traitors, we might say, or enemies inside the church in working in the Vatican. And Paul VI was very old when Gagnon came to him in, I think, May of 1978 with this report. And he was just in a state because one of his dearest friends was Aldo Moro. And this,
Mm.
everything in the balance then was whether Italy would remain sort of in the Western orbit or kind of be in between the West and the Soviet Union. There were Red Brigades in Italy. There were bombings in Italy called the Days of Lead.
Hmm.
So one of those incidents was the literal taking hostage, kidnapping of Aldo Moro, the Prime Minister of Italy, in March of 1978. Paul
Hmm.
VI was a close friend of his. So Paul VI came to the window in St. Peter's Square and said, "Dear Red Brigades, don't kill Aldo Moro. He's got a wife and children. If you wish, I give myself to you as a hostage." I mean, unbelievable historical times. But Aldo Moro was found in May of 78 in a car in the center of Rome, not far from the synagogue,
Hmm.
parked on a street, and his body filled with bullets. And he'd been killed. And they say that
And what happened then?
Paul VI was devastated. Italy was in turmoil, in sorrow, and Paul VI almost, I would say, was out of his mind. But he didn't want to face this dossier that Gagnon was presenting to him, and he said, "Okay, okay, okay, okay." He said, "I guess that you've done great work, but it's not for me right now. I think I will soon be departing, and it will be for my successor." So that was like May. So June passed, July passed, and August 6th of
Mhm.
1978, Paul VI died. So his heart was broken in May. The human body can only stand so much sorrow, so much loneliness, and then it declines, just like a drooping sunflower.
But Italy never fully became a communist government.
No, in fact, one of the great stories, and probably never has been fully written, is the back and forth all those years. Sorry, from 1945 till 1991, and then even today to a certain extent. Of course, the question of Europe falls into this, and it is very valid today. Again, you just raised the question. Trump is pivoting right now in a remarkable way. Even I'm surprised, although I had been given, in a sense, an insight into this as a long-term plan already in the 1990s. I've said this before, that Frank Shakespeare, the American ambassador to the Vatican in the 1980s, who became a friend of mine, I interviewed him several times. He said, first of all, that Reagan and Gorbachev would make a deal, and the Soviet Union would come to an end. This was in the late 80s. And then he said later, over time, the United States will eventually make an alliance with Russia. And I said, what? And so it took me years, but then later he and I and others, and you too, we traveled to Russia. And that's the reason that we continued to travel to Russia from the late 90s, almost every single year. And I gave a talk to a group of journalists and parliamentarians in Rome right around the time of Trump's election. And they said to me, "What's America going to do? What's Trump going to do?" And I said, "He's going to make a new agreement with the Russians."
You
And they
gave a
said,
talk, you said?
"Yeah, well, it was a kind of a dinner conversation."
Uh-huh.
I stood up from the dinner table and said, "I think this is what's going to happen." And they all looked like me as if I was a creature from Mars. They said,
Well,
"Well,
it is pretty
but
shocking.
but I was right.
Well,
That's what's happening. We are about to see an alliance between Russia and America. And you know who's left out?
everybody in the middle.
Europe."
Yeah.
And so even I don't know what this all means, but there's no other explanation for these latest events. They don't even talk to Zelensky.
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know, what does this seem to you? What is an
Well,
ordinary?
I will look at some maps if you want, because that's always helpful. But I don't know. To me, there's two conflicts that are ongoing. So Ukraine and Gaza, and
Okay, well,
so I
two
think
things.
I think that the Ukraine conflict is starting to take a backseat as far as like the priority of, you know, the new administration. They just don't want to deal with it almost at all. They just want to do whatever they can to stop, to, you know, wrap it up so that they can go after this, whatever it is that they want in the Middle East, which I am kind of trying to wrap my mind around, like, what do they exactly want in the Middle East? But it seems to be kind of a uh, it seems to be like this idea of maybe bringing down the government of Iran and trying to rebuild Gaza as a uh, kind of Riviera resort of the Middle East.
Riviera.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and so it
Okay,
doesn't
I mean, I would
seem
say,
like it's like they can't have two things going on at the same time, so they have to kind of wrap one up so they can focus on the other one. But
yeah, there's a lot that can be said, and I must preface this to anyone watching or listening. Those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know.
yeah, but you also have to, there's, you know, does that mean that Trump doesn't know, because Trump talks a lot about both conflicts?
You know, I wonder how fully aware of the entire plan even Trump is. But he's certainly playing a role and he's got a vision. But some of it came to him over the years and in different through different channels. Um, his own judgment of things. I don't think, did he take a trip to Russia? I think he made one trip in the alleged, you know,
Yeah, in the early 90s, there's this,
he was going to build something there in
yeah, there
Moscow.
was some
Yeah.
trip that was, yeah, he was there.
And no, you know, Trump is a remarkable figure, and I have a lot of respect for what I think he must be hard as nails to have gone through the property market in New York City. You know, how can he not
Yeah,
be?
he has a certain kind of restless energy. Like, he's awake at 2 a.m., he's tweeting,
Yeah,
he's not sleeping, but
yeah.
I also don't think that he understands at this deep level of, you know, the years of conflict in the Middle East, for example. So I think
Well,
that that should be,
I tend to.
or also like in Ukraine, but I don't think most people understand it. Also, that's not to say that, you know, it's something that is easily understood. I just think that it's something that you kind of need to have a background about in order to know what's really going on to make the right decision. And it's difficult to have that. I mean, you and I and other people that we talk to have a certain basis of knowledge, but even we have a pretty limited knowledge.
Well, I
Very
would
limited.
agree. You know, I tend to think that the arc of my life, which took me to Rome and to the Vatican, I appreciated the insight it gave me into centuries and into mystical religious evaluation of things. Much of the modern world, and I would include even Musk and Bezos and Bill Gates and these billionaires, I think they're, I don't want to,
I think they have a shallow
well, I don't think we
understanding
should
of.
say that. I don't know. They may be far,
I'm pretty comfortable saying that.
well, let's not, let's strike that, but let's say
I'm not gonna strike that.
we hope they would be profound. Let's just say that's what we
I
would hope.
I don't think that Jeff Bezos would be able to tell you
Okay, well,
the
let's avoid that.
history
Um,
of Ukraine.
let-
It's a free country. We can say what we want.
well, I mean, that's the concern is even that in Trump's closest circle, there may not be the figures who would have the depth that a Vatican diplomat with a training of almost 10 years and
Yeah.
a
So
knowledge of 10 languages and
yeah.
postings in Nigeria, in Venezuela, in Singapore, or in the United States, in Germany. They have a global sense. In time and in space, they have a breadth of understanding which enables them to say, let's try to work for something that is a resolution to a bloody mess over and over again. And Trump does want to resolve the bloody mess. I'm impressed and agree that he should attempt to solve this bloody mess in Ukraine. And the
Yeah.
Pope has tried to do that. Actually, it's something that links Trump and this Pope in a kind of, but and also Vigano, certainly Archbishop Vigano, our old friend. He certainly does not want the slaughter in the Ukraine and has opposed it staunchly. So the suffering there is so painful to see. And then the suffering in Gaza is also painful to see. So the diplomatic way is the way I think of the Vatican. It's the way of the highest aspirations of the humanist. How can you settle just by force a disagreement? How can I say you're wrong and I'm right? You say no, I'm
Well,
right and you're wrong, and then I say no, I'm going to kill you, and the debate is over.
okay. Well, let me just bring up this point that the conflict in the Middle East is a religious conflict. So the this idea that, you know, the one side or the other side must prevail is rooted in the fact that they are 100%, they believe that the land was given to them by, you know, their God, their religious tradition, it's in their holy book. So the Jews believe the land was given to them. The Palestinians believe that the land was, you know, they were given the land through living there and also through the connection that Islam has with the land. There's some connection with, you know, the Prophet Muhammad going to Jerusalem. I'm not exactly sure what happened, you know, what that exact connection is. But so that is something that goes a lot deeper than just, you know, how can we like resolve this conflict peacefully? Like both of those parties are always going to believe that they are the true and rightful owners of the land.
Yeah. Well,
because it's part of their religion. So I mean, that's just the reality of, and so what I see happening now is I see different steps towards the American policy also just trying to support this kind of vision for the you know, the establishment of Israel as a kind of very, not only like a secular Israel, but like the vision of like a second homeland that you'd see like in Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
So
Michael Laurenti is saying, well said, Christopher. I agree. Definitely a religious war.
but the problem is that the more that one or the other side gains an advantage, like even if Israel were to take over Gaza, take over the West Bank, completely, you know, sideline the Iranian government from interfering with them. Iran isn't even really powerful. Like they don't have the power to actually affect Israel in any real way, as we saw so far. Like all of their missiles were shot down. But even if they get every single thing that they want, even if they achieve all of those goals, there is a whole Islamic world out there that is going to just kind of sit and bide their time, and like 20 years from now or 30 years from now, it's all going to start over again. So
well, no,
that's how I see it. And I actually think it's the same with Ukraine. I think even, I don't know what the right thing is to do, but I do know that kind of just stopping the war right now and having all of these like territorial gains of Russia just frozen, and saying, okay, you just have to have a ceasefire, that would stop people from dying right now, which is good, but it also will lead to more people dying again in 15 or 20 or 30 years, because people still are going to have this generational feeling that they lost their homes unfairly, and so they need to go get them back, or their nation was unfairly stripped of all of this territory that was rightfully theirs.
Oh man, my thoughts are exceeding this possibility of expression. I have 100 thoughts, and I'm therefore tongue-tied.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, I
I
mean, I just think that the reality is extremely complex. It's not that there is no solution at all, but it's also, I do think that Americans, just in general, it's in our part of our culture, we like a quick fix. We really like to say, oh, we really like to kind of ride in, like, on like a cowboy, ride into town and shoot some revolvers and say, hey, we're here, we're going to solve everything. And the rest of the world doesn't really work like that. There's thousands of years of history. There's extremely different, there's extremes of cultures and languages and grudges and blood feuds. And
okay.
I think that our view of it, and I think that some of the things that, even it's difficult. Like, I think that JD Vance's speech, for example, at the Munich Security Conference, I think I'm kind of getting rolling now. I think that JD Vance's speech was mostly for domestic viewers. It wasn't really it wasn't really something that it wasn't something that was ever going to get across to the mentality of like the audience that he was speaking to was so different than his mentality. His mentality
I
is,
just
yeah,
need,
we're here, so we need to just quickly solve this problem. And the best way to do it is to have like unlimited free speech, have this German AfD party, like, let them be part of the process. But it doesn't quite work. Like, it's not quite going to work. I think, like, his view of like how Germany should run their politics is not quite uh feasible right now.
yeah,
So
again, I got so many thoughts, but I'll just choose one path.
yeah,
Many peace negotiations have been held
yeah,
after many different wars, and if we study just a bit, we look 1815. What did we have? The Council of Vienna, and they tried to make peace after the Napoleonic Wars, and they carved out space for the old European aristocratic class to remain in a certain power. The Austro-Hungarian Empire remained. The Hohenzollerns, in a sense, still remained in Germany. Certainly, the Romanovs and the Tsars still remained in Russia. But meanwhile, France had taken this democratic French
yeah.
Revolution,
The
and
yeah
but
the
they
Republic.
restored. They kind of had a combination of Louis Philippe
Yeah,
and then Napoleon's children. And then England had this monarchy, but also a democracy. The United States did not have a monarchy, but we did have a kind of class of, oil barons and train, Wall Street financial barons. The 20s passed, the 30s passed, the war was picked up again, the Second World War, and under even more violent ideological terms. And then Europe was split into two parts. So we didn't ever have the end of that war truly, because we called it the Cold War.
yeah.
Remember
And
that?
it's kind of still. Do I
That was
remember the Cold War? Yeah,
no, you
I
can. You
I
were
don't remember the Cold War.
you were born in '89, and I had
Yeah.
you in a pouch in my jacket in Rome when you were 6 months old. December 1st, Gorbachev came to Rome, and he was in
Mm-hmm.
Piazza Venezia. He was walking around with the crowd, and I brought you as close as I could to him. We were 5 feet away from him. There were 2 bodyguards. He was standing there. We weren't actually able to touch him, but we were very close. He had the mark on his forehead.
Yeah. The
And
birthmark.
yeah. And so but that moment when a Russian communist prime minister of the Politburo is walking among the crowds in Piazza Venezia in Rome represents that was the end of the Soviet time. It wasn't officially signed off, but he had come and met with the Catholic Pope, John Paul II. That was the same day, December 1st.
Yeah.
He came in. I was also in Cortile San Damaso that morning, and he drives up in a big black limousine, comes around, and we were all standing, about 40, 50 of us journalists in the corner. And I remember the door swinging open and Raisa stepping out, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she looked very elegant. And then he gets out, and I could see even from across the square there, Cortile San Damaso, his head. And I, of course, as a young guy, I was about your age then. And I said, wow, I'm here at history. Gorbachev is getting out, and he's going to go up that elevator, which you and I have later, we've taken that same elevator. But he went up to see John Paul in the Apostolic Palace, and the leader of sort of world atheism spoke with the leader of world belief. So, and that was about the moment of your birth. But since then, I think the figure that becomes
Ukrainian. He was half Ukrainian, half Russian, and half Ukrainian.
Gorbachev?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the point is, this conferences for peace continue to be held. And meanwhile, nations prepare for war and they fight wars. And then they decide not to continue those wars. And so conferences for peace, you're saying, shouldn't just look for 6 months or 1 year solution, but try to get something for 50 or 100 years, a true peace. And the second thing I'm thinking of is all of these disasters over and over. The last one, I think, is Afghanistan. We August 15th, what was it?
2021.
2021, August 15th. I wrote a letter that day.
2020, because 2021, because Biden was in already.
Yeah. And I said, I wrote, we can left, what do we leave? $80 billion of equipment. And above all, we left hundreds of people who we said to over the years, we're going to back you up. Afghanistan will become a kind of democratic country. America will be your big brother, and we will have commercial and
America does that to everybody, though.
I know,
America did that to Ukraine.
So I'm ashamed.
In the process of doing that.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. I'm ashamed of my country and of our leadership because they don't seem like serious men of honor, and I'm concerned that this new group, in spite of the fact I'm so hopeful, and I think they're more honorable in many, many ways than this prior class. Mm-hmm. But I'm just concerned that they're kind of swashbuckling in a way, and they're not looking for the long term. And I
think that there's also the fact, there's two things that I would add. And the first is that it's easy to, first of all, it's when I think about like any war, any conflict, I always think, would I want to fight in that conflict? Am I willing to like go personally and fight? And the answer is almost always no. Like, I don't know what it would take for me to personally go and fight. So I don't want to support, I don't want to unequivocally support any war or conflict that I myself don't believe in enough to possibly like go fight in myself, because that's just kind of secondhand warmongering.
What you're saying is if there's a principle or a person whom you love and you will die for, you're willing to fight. say your mother
Well, I
is
think
being,
everybody, yeah, I mean,
and,
everybody has the point that the, and
or
I
your
think,
mother, or your motherland, as you say, your patria, if it's going to be
yeah,
taken and raped and exploited and pillaged.
yes, and
But at
that
this,
is what, and I know people in Ukraine, not myself, but I know people who had that exact same process, who went through that same process, who did not want to fight in a war, but who believed that they had to do that because their country was getting invaded.
I know, I know.
And I don't want to, yeah, and actually I kind of do want to get into some of the, previous decade of,
Well, that's
the
important.
conflict in
We have to
Ukraine.
put
But
it in context, but you have to go
yeah,
even back further. But the
yeah,
other side of the coin is there's so many people who speak about this Marine Corps colonel, or was he a general, Smedley Butler? Was that his name? Who fought?
yeah,
And he
yeah,
said
yeah, yeah,
it's always the banks and the wealthy and the commercial interests that gin up a war in a sense,
yeah,
and tell the government it's necessary to protect these interests. And we've got that same language. America's interest is now going to be the key factor. You and I, from a kind of Christian humanism, say the true, we're sort of a combination of apostolic writers like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and St. Paul, with Marcus Aurelius, who wasn't a Christian, but he had a humanistic vision. And we kind of take humanity as a work in project where there should be diplomacy and there should be conversation and there should be kind of common good. Wouldn't you
yeah,
say that's the principle? And yet, of course, there's this horrible moments when invasions occur and
yeah. Like,
get,
so we need to somehow not not just support some kind of war or some kind of conflict that, we ourselves are just, so I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say I support the war in Ukraine, for example. I wouldn't say that I want to see that war just go on and on and on. Like, I certainly don't want to see that continue like indefinitely. But at the same time, I want certain things to happen so that there is so to bring about a future that's more peaceful and that's more prosperous and that has
okay.
a lot of it's
That,
but and so
that's a beautiful. That's
and
a
because
beautiful. That's a
and the
beautiful
way
sentiment. It's
towards
a beautiful
the way
sentiment.
towards doing that not necessarily may require some type of sacrifice right now that is not just like giving all of this territory up to Russia, like they seem like they might do very soon.
Okay, well, okay. I guess let's go right to the videotape here and look at a couple of maps.
Okay, let's take a look at the So,
Okay, what
oh,
is this map?
well, this is the current state of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So,
Okay, and what we're doing, Pope Francis is still in the hospital. He's 88. He's called for peace in Ukraine. Trump was just elected on January 20th. We're now February 21st. He's 31 days into office. He said he would bring peace in one day. He hasn't done it in one day, but he's already sent Marco Rubio
yeah,
to meet with Sergei Lavrov, who's quite an impressive diplomat, very tough, very learned, and they've had a conversation, Marco and Sergei, and
yeah,
Zelensky or any representative from Ukraine was not invited.
yeah,
In the midst of all this, you and I are thinking, how can peace, and a kind of secure and long-lasting peace and a fair and just peace, and we are doing that from the position of simple, thoughtful citizens, Americans who are Catholics, who are looking at history, who have traveled in these places. So we're not experts, but
no,
we are the type of people that have a legitimate right to vote in our society and
yeah.
are
But the people need to begin to try to think about these things for themselves, or otherwise the thing is decided for them.
okay. So what are we looking at here? Just kind of talk through
Well,
all the
so
things that
okay,
come to
so
your
the
mind. How
so
would you
the
explain someone who really has never traveled there? I mean, I guess we start with
well,
with the
okay, so
water
we
in the
see
land. What?
yeah, well, we see four main areas. I mean, there's the yellow area, which is area that's currently controlled by Ukraine.
Okay.
Then there's the kind of darker red area, darker pink or red, which is the area that used to be part of Ukraine that's controlled by Russia. And then there's the light pink, which is Russia. And then there's this blue, which was kind of controlled by Russia, but Ukraine has taken it back. So that was like the first few months or so of the war, when we had, there was the invasion from Belarus.
Okay.
They
Where's
took Kharkiv.
Belarus?
Okay, so Ukraine, if you go from the very top, and you go counterclockwise, the top right above Ukraine, and obviously to the left of Russia, to the west of Russia, is Belarus.
Which means,
Belarus is what do you mean?
what's
Which
the word
means
mean?
Belarus, yeah, white Russia, yeah,
Okay. What
kind
does
of
Bella mean?
white Rus, really, white Rus.
So Bella,
Bieli,
Biela.
Bieli in Russian is Rus, is
Okay.
is white.
So it's really Russia, but the white part of Russia, you might say.
Well, yes, it's Rus. It's Russia is the modern
Okay.
one of the three modern nations of Rus. So in history, there was kind of this tripartite understanding that there was Mala Rossiya, which is Little Russia, Little
Which,
Rus or Small
which
Rus, which
is
was Ukraine,
Ukraine.
modern
Yeah.
Ukraine, and then there's Великая Rus, so Malaya Rus, Velika Rus, and Bielaya Rus. And so someone's going to
So
watch this,
Velikia is old Russian.
correct me, but
What's
Velikaya Rus would be great Russia,
okay? Which is up.
large Russia,
So
great
that's
Russia.
the upper right hand corner going on up to Moscow
Yeah,
and beyond, and then it basically ended up becoming an empire and taking over everything to the Pacific. But the
yeah.
original, okay, and then to the
But
very
those are the three nations, and they have three slightly different languages. So Ukrainian, Russian, and Belarusian are all fairly similar. They're like Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, but they all speak very similar languages, related languages, and Belarus is mostly Russian speaking now, and Ukraine under
actually
communism was
we
Russian
should have the
speaking as
map,
well, but
which we should have a map dividing it into language areas. I don't know if you could find one and call one up. You want me to look for one?
yeah, you
But
can look for but I wanted to keep going counterclockwise around, because there's Belarus on the top, right on the top there. Then next to Belarus to the left is Poland. South of Poland is Slovakia, and then Slovakia, Hungary, and then Romania, and then Moldova. So basically, it's this patchwork of Eastern European countries that back before the First World War were all either part of Austro-Hungarian Empire or Russian Empire. There was kind of this border of Austro-Hungary and Russia but anyway, I just I kind of, I don't know how you would resolve this conflict. It seems like right now the way that it will end is, the way that a kind of ceasefire will happen is that all of these territories that are in this dark pink that are controlled by Russia will just simply become recognized as part of Russia. They already had some kind of plebiscite, or they had some type of some vote. That they claimed that it was, the citizens of these areas voted to join Russia. So, but it's unclear to me how that will. It's unclear to me how that's going to bring any kind of long-term peace, because Ukrainians would never accept that. I mean, they will accept it, but like after like 10, 15 years, like I said, it would kind of, I don't know. Maybe it could work, but it just seems
Well, I think
something doesn't sit right about it. I mean,
okay.
it's as if the U.S. invaded, Mexico or Canada and just took.
Well, it may not be so far fetched, but
Yeah, took a
so
chunk.
I,
Yeah,
I I take a kind of all
as
right.
the U.S. has done in the past. So
Have you heard of the latest proposal to take half of the lithium and other metals of
yes,
Ukrainian mines in
yes, I think it's
in exchange for what? That's part of the deal that Trump is
in exchange, I
proposing.
guess, for continued, funding of this war.
Yeah, but some people are saying on the internet that if Trump is really looking at this as a business deal, he's
Yeah,
thinking, well, why not just let Russia take it over and I'll buy it from the Russians who are under pressure and they want to I'll buy it at an even cheaper price, cheaper
but
than,
you mean by the natural resources?
yeah, I read that on the internet.
Well, I mean, I think if you just look at it in terms of natural resources, then I mean, yeah, that kind of fits with the general policy of, international foreign policy of the United States, is to kind of reduce everything to how can we have access to resources so that our corporations can continue to
Flourish.
uh, make ever greater profits. But
Is that a basis for a noble and
I don't
and
know, but it seems to be that,
and a
yeah.
happy prospect for the future of humanity?
I mean, that's capitalism, isn't it?
Okay. First, again, I want to look at you. I'm going
Or
to
not?
we'll hold that in abeyance. I do think I want to get before we end. I want to get up to
Gotta get to some,
Solzhenitsyn,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
let's take a look at the blue areas you didn't mention. It's the water, and what does
yeah.
that all mean? What's all that water? What are those areas at the bottom? And
That's the
actually, there's a
Black
big chunk,
Sea.
the
Yeah.
Black Sea,
Hmm.
and of
So yeah,
course,
right in the central kind of southern Black Sea coast of Ukraine. It's probably too small to really see. If I make this full screen on my own, yeah, you can't really see it, but right there, right near the border with Moldova, is the city of Odessa. So Odessa was
yeah,
major
yeah.
city of the Russian Empire, major city of the Soviet Union,
In other words,
and
people call it sort of
yeah.
offhand. They say Russian city. They call it.
Yeah, I don't know about, yeah, I mean, they do speak Russian there, so it's culturally Russian. Yeah.
But
I mean, it's culturally Russian speaking. I
okay,
wouldn't say
so
culturally
I
Russian,
mean,
but
I must
Russian
say,
speaking.
okay, and you're
But I've
saying
never
that,
been there, so I can't
but
really
are you
speak
saying,
to it.
well, I do read that the Russians, in one way, would like to proceed forward and not stop right where this red is, but
Yeah.
take the entire coast all the
Yeah.
way to Odessa, because and that would block.
That's what many people, yeah,
Okay, which
say
would
that
be
they want.
fatal in some sort of sense to the long-term aspirations of Ukraine to be a flourishing country with a
Yeah, they
seaport
would
and
have no
sea,
coastline. Yeah.
no coastline. So that would be a devastating thing.
Yeah.
And the idea would be maybe to negotiate something now, but any patriotic Ukrainian must say, no, no, no. Let's
Yeah.
get all our territory back, including Crimea, and let's not accept, because it does look like a truncated country here. But other
Yeah.
people are saying, well, if the war continues, the Russians are sort of teetering now on the edge of pushing this entire line back, as
Yeah.
the Ukrainians are starting to call up women. They're starting to call up very young, they were mostly 25 or 26-year-old and older. They've now
Hmm.
started to call up 18 to 25. There's different estimates of the death that has occurred here. Uh, Trump has used a figure of 1 million deaths. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's true, but he seems to speak a little offhandedly at times. But I, I I guess reading the internet, I would say that it seems to me that the Russians have suffered some tens of thousands of deaths and more wounded,
Yeah.
but that the Ukrainians have suffered hundreds of thousands of deaths and more wounded, so maybe over 1 million. So the concept to me, the very first concept in my mind from this last 3
Well,
years is that something terrible happened and people took young men and broke their bodies into bloody pieces and continue to do so now for 3 years. A lot of money was spent doing it. It came from America. It also came from Russia,
yeah.
came perhaps behind Russia, maybe China and North Korea, but it also came from the Europeans. And what is the situation and what's going to come of
That's
all this? For me, if you love Ukraine, you say this was the most horrible thing that could happen. 10 million people have left the country. Many may never come back. This whole red area on the side was the most industrialized area. It was Russian speaking, but there
mhm.
had been a co-vivenza, a living
That-
together that
yeah.
had been within one country with a slightly different vibe than Russia. It was Ukraine.
Yeah.
You and I, as non-Russians and non-Ukrainians, really have no right to speak about what they conceive of their lives to have been. But there was certainly an
Well,
interchange and an exchange. People would
yeah.
marry, a Russian would marry a Ukrainian would
Yeah,
marry a
yeah.
Russian. So,
It was a very kind of fluid line. It wasn't like you are a Russian, I'm a Ukrainian. It was like, your grandparents came from Russia and mine came from, Lvov, but we still are, you know, and most people, I would say, even in Kiev or however you pronounce it these days, most people were speaking Russian in 2013,
well, even
and
Zelensky, Chris, do you know
the,
Zelensky himself was a
of
Russian
course,
speaker? He learned
who I know,
Ukrainian
yeah.
as an adult.
I listened to all of Zelensky's interviews before he became the president. They were all in Russian.
Yeah.
So, and then he
Okay.
started to speak Ukrainian.
So
And
my first reaction on looking at this map is sorrow.
so that's
That
why I also don't quite understand why I think, yeah, it's so I don't even understand why there was a need for uh this full scale invasion of Russia basically. I think I'll let you speak in a second, but I think Russia traded the kind of goodwill of the entire nation of Ukraine, or at least 70, 80, 90% of all Ukrainians who had a positive view of Russia and mostly spoke Russian. If, even if they were bilingual, they would speak, one of their two languages would have been Russian. And they traded that and they flipped from 85, 90% positive view of Russia to 85, 90% negative view of Russia. And they got in exchange these dark pink territories. And I think
well,
that's the trade-off that they kind of decided to make.
okay, that's we could talk for 10 days, and I would like to
Yeah.
continue to talk, and I would like to come to clarity, and I'm sure there are viewers that may be very irritated with what we've said or frustrated.
Yeah.
We may seem too
I don't know.
simplistic, but I would like to add at least a few points.
Yeah.
Up on the top of this map, there's the location of Chernobyl. Chernobyl.
Yeah. Right.
That was
Yeah. Yeah.
inside of Ukraine, and it became an area, a dead area, and it's just to the north of Kiev. I don't know exactly. I
It's
can't.
right where there's that little dip down in that blue area. I wish I could like have a little
Well,
pointer, but right in the center of the northern border of Ukraine, there's an area that dips down in a little horseshoe kind of shape.
yeah.
And right below that is Chernobyl.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I was
It's
once.
not far from Kiev. It's very close.
Yeah, I know. And I was
Yeah.
in Rome in the spring of 1986, and it occurred
Yeah.
in April. And they said a nuclear power plant has blown up.
Mhm.
It's sending waves of radiation over northern Europe, but there are provisions that it could shift and go center and even southern Europe and come over Italy. And it
Mhm.
said, don't go out into the Villa Doria Pamphili and take your afternoon walk because the air may have radioactivity in it. And it said, don't buy any lettuce
Mm.
because if they harvest the lettuce, it may have radioactivity in the air falling on it.
Mm.
And I felt then sorrow, incredible sorrow that the air of our world, I mean, I knew of Hiroshima. I knew we all had 7,000 nuclear bombs. I knew there had been a couple of dangerous incidents of nuclear power plants, but those were the most apocalyptic days that the air of Rome, you weren't born, you were born 2, 3 years later, 3 years
Mhm.
later. So I was a young man and thinking, are we going to, it was like a match going off, which could, if
Yeah.
we were also worried that the whole plant was going to blow up.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
So, and I was later told by some people I chatted with in Rome that the reason the Soviet Union fell
Yeah.
was that the Western Europeans saw what had happened in the air coming over their countries, the Swedes and the Germans, and they said, that's enough.
Mm.
The technological incapacity of the Russian Soviets or the Soviets throughout the Soviet Union had put too much danger of an apocalyptic environmental disaster for the Western Europeans, and
Mm.
the regime had to change. I know it sounds funny, but that I was
No,
told.
but it also more than that. From what I have heard from different people, it uh, made people inside the Soviet Union very angry at their government and
Okay,
willing to
well,
do a lot,
I
and
mean,
including in Kazakhstan. That was when they had the Jeltoksan, which is the autumn revolt, street revolts in 1986. That was partly caused by well, that was also other political things, but that was around this time of the Chernobyl, and that was actually in Kazakhstan was one of the first open public protests against the Soviet Union. That
okay.
was another
So I
interesting
mean,
fact.
as you look at history, you're always looking at elites. There's a communist party, or there's a group of powerful capitalists, or there's a group of nobles, noble families, or Roman senators, or whatever they may be. But in the Soviet Union, that leading group lost its authority. And I think, in a way, it's also happened in America with the woke group. I think we're really tired of them. But at the same time, this new group coming in, offering itself to replace them, has got to, I think, deepen and widen its understanding of history and its breadth of compassion
Yeah,
for the downtrodden and the poor and the hopeful, which I think is what truly made America great and what could make America great again. But it has to be a good greatness. It can't just be continual speaking of American interest. What's our interest?
yeah.
We have to have a
Uh,
common interest, or else the world won't go along with us.
Um, I agree with you, and I wanted to also say that I think that there was a lot of I think when the first time that I was in Ukraine was 2013, I think I was 23 years old, and I just was so impressed by this, even the fact that people would speak two languages. They would speak Russian, Ukrainian. They were kind of on good terms with Russia, but they also had their own identity that they were proud of. They also considered themselves European. And so it was a kind of harmony. They were
Harmony.
living in harmony with each other,
That's a great
right?
word. There should be a peace conference to create harmony, not to create just deals.
Yeah. But
Okay.
what happened over the next 3 or 4 years was this complete polarization on both
Okay.
sides, and it was almost like a chain reaction of like when certain things happened, like these first but after Maidan, when
But
these
Chris, wouldn't you agree though that these
yeah,
things too are piloted in a certain way? There are influencers. There were influencers even then.
yeah,
At that
it's
time, it was
very
the
easy
press,
to
and
yeah.
and so somehow Ukraine was sold a bill of goods, I think.
Well, I think that Ukraine believed that the U.S. and European Union were more really would stand by like what they claim to be all about, which
Okay,
is,
but see,
democracy and
there's a tremendous question here. And the question revolves around this issue. And maybe we should speak to Michael Laurenti, or maybe we should
yeah,
come
we can
back.
do a couple. Let's do a couple questions. Hold that thought. Don't forget what you're about to say.
Well, my thought was that Ukraine was manipulated into a position which now seems to be abandoned, when reminding me of us abandoning Afghanistan. And what I said
Yeah.
earlier, I didn't finish. We had 6,000 or 16,000 or 36,000 Afghans, and we said, we're going to always protect you and take care of you. And we left them. Some of them are being killed now, arrested and killed, because they worked with us for
It's
years.
crazy.
And I think
it's not. At some point, you do have to let the country, stand on its own too, though. So I see.
Well, your idea of harmony is the correct idea, but in Ukraine, we were kind of promoting disharmony in a sense. I'm saying
I agree. Yeah.
it's all the money spent. There was a report,
But
Victoria Nuland, who was sort of the top strategist in the Secretary of State office, Department of State. She handled Ukraine, and she has ancestors from Ukraine, and she said in some public speech, we can find it and maybe even bring it up on the podcast, $5 billion were spent by the United States between 1991 and 2013 to promote the idea of complete Ukrainian independence from any dependence on Russia and complete integration into Europe. But this was leaving Russia behind.
that's actually less than I thought it would be.
But the point is that now we're stepping back almost overnight since Trump's election to say, okay, we're going to do deals now with Russia again, which is all Russia ever wanted, if you follow what I'm saying. We could, in other words, we lost 30 years here. Then when the Soviet Union fell, we had the chance to make friends with Russia, and we started to do that. And then Jeffrey Sachs went in and worked with his, what was the president's name? Yeltsin, who had a weakness for drink. And but he came from Ekaterinburg, where we visited in 2018. Yeah. Remember the big center to Yeltsin there. So, and Jeffrey and the others, Igor. Anyway,
I think the other
they sold off the entire Russian production. The Soviet production of 70 years of communism had been some hydroelectric plants and some thing, and they sold them all off to they privatized everything.
Yeah.
This was the shock therapy, and the Russian people were impoverished.
Yeah.
I mean, the Soviets actually probably were better off than the Russians in the 90s, and so Putin came to power, and he started to rebuild somehow a more balanced. I don't know. All I know is we missed an opportunity in the 90s, and I think almost everyone who's truly thoughtful would agree. Meantime, we verged over into this new society of the woke and the post-Christian West. And that's the other main theme of the last 30 years. And now we're in 2025, and we're doing all these things without understanding the history behind how we got here. Anyway.
Well, the history is so complex, but yeah, I think even in Ukraine, if you look at Western Ukraine, which is basically everything kind of to the west of that last blue area on the top, that is almost like going to that area of Ukraine is almost like a different country from central Ukraine. And those are the only two areas that I've been. But obviously Eastern Ukraine would be like very similar to Russia, like Russian speaking, large Soviet style cities. And then central Ukraine was also Russian speaking and more Russified, but then Western Ukraine is Ukrainian speaking, and Lvov was never even, I believe Lvov was not even part of the Soviet Union until 1945. Like that area was always part of, it was part of Austro-Hungary, I think.
Well, I think the original name
as part of the Austrian Empire. After World War I, it was then part of Poland.
Yeah, So and
and then
Poland is that
so
in the upper left-hand corner? That's
yeah.
Poland, right? Yeah.
So yeah, so Lvov is very much like the Russian language never was even spoken in that area. So they have a completely different relationship to like the Russian language and Russian culture just due to history. Like that's just the kind of, I guess, randomness of history, or the historical events led to this western part of Ukraine having a very independent nationalistic pride that the rest of Ukraine didn't have as much of. So
Well,
people that are always pushing, let's all speak Ukrainian and let's
well, not only pushing, they made it illegal to speak Russian.
yeah, I don't, is that, I'm not
It's-
completely sure about that, but yeah,
Well,
it seems like there was like the first thing that was like some law, but I don't know if it was actually illegal to speak Russian, or we'd have to check that.
all right.
I think we should check that. But I agree. They did kind of unnecessarily shoot themselves in the foot with their own extremism. Absolutely. Yeah.
But the real point, really, of our conversation, and which will continue in coming weeks, is everything has changed in the past 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Trump and Putin are about to meet. Sergei Lavrov, the chief diplomat of Russia, foreign minister of Russia, already met with Marco Rubio a few days ago.
Yeah.
And they're kind of discussing their settlement. So the two key elements of this are Zelensky or any representative of Ukraine is out,
Yeah.
and there is no other representative from Europe. So what we see in 4 weeks since the election of President Donald Trump and his chief advisor, Elon Musk, is that, and his vice president, J.D. Vance, no, these guys certainly have their vision. I think their vision is lacking in a metaphysical transcendence which relates to the eternal holy God who created the universe and provides humanity with an inborn longing for a relationship that transcends matter itself, flesh and blood. But I do think flesh and blood is very precious. And we get that also from the very fact of the incarnation of Christ. But all of this that we're doing now in an increasingly post-Christian world, embracing artificial intelligence and mercantile deals, is preparing us for a new kind of iron age, lacking in honor, lacking in grace, lacking in beauty and dignity, and lacking in harmony. So I may be wrong about everything I just said, but I
Well, you
don't
always
think I
say
am.
it's a fallen world.
Yeah, but this fallen world, I always say that. Well, so our viewers can see how I raised you.
No, but did your father used to say that, or I don't
Yes,
know?
yes, yeah.
It's
This
the
is it.
Boston accent. It's the Boston accent that makes it.
Well,
It's a
it's a fun.
fallen world.
Well, because it's the only way to understand why our hopes get smashed, and we weep even as children, but certainly even as older adult people when beautiful things, cities and plantations and family gatherings are put to flight. We're put to we become refugees, immigration prisoners. So it's a fallen world is an explanation that all of our hopes and dreams, which is much more even than the American dream. The American dream is got some beautiful elements, but the ultimate dream, the dream of harmony and reconciliation and redemption, brings this fallenness through sacrifice to a new level. But it's a level that requires humility. It's these are all true things from the very. So we can't just be proud and arrogant and stomp around the world. Okay, here we go. We're going to input this. So I said just now, the last 4 weeks,
let's try to.
The whole situation has changed in the last 4 weeks. So there's a new gang in town and a new paradigm.
New sheriff in town.
New sheriff in town. Vance used those terms
Yeah.
in his speech in Munich on St. Valentine's Day, the 14th of February. He spoke in Munich and he said there's a new sheriff in town. And that sheriff is
Riding
meeting,
into town with a revolver on the hip.
well, they're meeting with the Russians, and they're leaving the Europeans and the Ukrainians, who are also Europeans, out. But the Russians, isn't it sort of the fundamental point that you and I have always believed that the Russians and even the Americans are, in a sense, Europeans by roots and cultural and Christian humanism, and that this real necessity of this age would be a reanimation. And this, I think, was the message of Pope Benedict the 16th. I think I understand him. I've spoken to him many times. I spoke to him many times. I read his writings and his talks. I was near to his mind. And I think some of those same thoughts were expressed by this other man, a Russian, a prominent Russian named.
I think Russians, as individuals, can be very great people, and I think that Russian culture and civilization has produced many great minds and works of art. Russian Orthodoxy is if you go to Russian Orthodox service, it's a very moving service, mass, whatever you want to call it.
Divine liturgy.
Liturgy, yeah.
The divine liturgy is the same thing as what we call the Mass. It
Yeah.
is the celebration of the memory of Jesus in his starting more or less in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
The Passover, and then his sacrifice, his death, and resurrection.
But at the same time, I think that what's happened the last 3 years is going to take another 30 or 40 years to kind of be healed, I would say.
Okay, that'll be your task. But I would say I felt all through from 2000 to 2020, during 20 trips to Russia, I continually felt that there had never been a full reconciliation of what the 70 years of communism had been, the pros and cons, the goals and the failures, and to kind of integrate that. So if you're thinking that these 3 years of war will never be overcome for 30 or 40 years without a long process
There
of
has to be some reckoning,
but there's never been a reckoning.
Who did what to whom, and kind of agreed upon, like, what was but I just don't see that happening. That's the sad thing.
Well, the question is, to a certain degree, that must happen in all disputes, even inside a family. Like if you and your brother were fighting, and then either I or your mother would say, okay, who did this first, or who, took from the other, or what's fair here, or what do you want? What did you want? You tried to go back over the facts.
Yeah.
And I remember you, and I've said this before, you had a native sense of justice. I'm going way back, though, to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. I cut a pie for you and your brother, and I gave you the bigger piece, like 2/3 to you, 1/3 to him, because you were 3 years older than your brother.
Yeah.
And you looked at me and said, Dad, you made the two pieces a different size. It's not fair. And I said, what do you want me to do? He said, make them even. Same for him, same for me. I've never forgotten that. In other words, what is just? People know.
I completely forgot that, but yeah.
Well, no, you did say that. You looked at me, and I did do what you asked. I perhaps should have said, well, you're bigger, you eat more. But I was so struck by your native sense of fairness. Same for him as for me. And with tariffs, Trump is saying that about the tariffs, the same that they charge us, we charge them. That's fair. However, there's also a sense in which we're always trying to get some type of advantage. And the whole greatness of human life is when there's a mutual win-win.
Yeah.
And even the division of labor, I'm a talker and someone else builds the brick wall. I can also
Right.
build a wall, though. My dad built walls, and I mean, this was the
Yeah.
old idea of the monks, the Benedictine monks, and it was picked up again in some of communist thinking. But it's
Yeah.
even in American thinking about the working man and the nobility of work. But the Benedictine monks said, "Ora et labora,"
Mm.
pray and work. Don't disdain simply doing work, even because there's a balance even in that, and
Mm.
that's why we always appreciate the uh, the nobleman or even the cleric who does what ordinary people do. And
Yeah.
anyway, I'm just babbling now, but because this is important, and then we're going to go on and we're going to see some of the Russians today that sort of do not, or do try to, or do not inherit the greatness of Solzhenitsyn.
Yeah. So should we? Yeah. So I like this quote. Um, I think it's I think it's a great quote about the fallen world, like we were talking about. So if only it were all so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?
Wow, profound and very Christian. The Christian teaching is to regard first your own soul and to try to save it and not allow it to become damned and destroyed and disformed and hateful, ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And he is expressing that. But many utopian visions, including some of these presented by the circle around Pope, or not Pope Trump, but President Trump, uh, they're utopian visions that don't look to the individual soul. They're kind of large scale visions of us plugging into some type of algorithm,
Mm,
as if this will provide the perfect solution to human social problems. And
mm.
I think you should answer at that moment with these words. You should memorize them if you can. If
Yeah.
only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously destroying the social harmony, and it
Yeah.
were necessary only to separate them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being
Yeah.
who is willing. Okay.
Because it's not, it's so easy to say us versus them. Like they're the bad people, the Russians are the bad people, or, the Ukrainians are just the bad, uh, you know, people, whatever, like people that are, there's all kinds of different uh, perspectives that are trying to present one side of any given. The Jews are no, like the Israelis are, doing evil things, and the Palestinians are horrible people. But it's so easy to always just like divide things into black and white, and sometimes you need to have some facts that you agree on, which are black and white. I don't dispute that, but you also, I think most of the time, it's never quite as simple as just there's evil people that are insidiously committing evil deeds. It's always way more
Well,
uh,
I mean,
complex.
what I hear in your words is the fundamental need to understand each other in order to make peace and to live together and not just ethnically cleanse
Yeah.
requires a look and look into one's own soul and into the other's soul. If and you strike me almost to be in the spirit of what Jesus was saying when he spoke his parables. He was speaking sometimes of the Samaritan who was not a Jew, but he was the one who stopped and helped the man who had fallen into robbers and been left
Yeah,
wounded
yeah.
on the roadside. He said, "Well, a rabbi walked by, a Pharisee
Mm,
walked by, and then the Samaritan came by. He was the good Samaritan." But so goodness isn't,
Yeah.
I mean, and Christians often do this too. And maybe you and I could be guilty sometimes of very grave thought simplifications. And we have to
Yeah.
be, part of the reason we talk to each other is to try to,
Humility. That's what this second quote is about.
okay, go ahead and read it.
So second one says it's a universal law. Intolerance is the first sign of an inadequate education. An ill-educated person behaves with arrogant impatience, whereas truly profound education breeds humility.
All right.
So I think that these are just two great quotes from Solzhenitsyn.
Do you think you can memorize them?
Johnson. Yeah, I can. I don't know if I can. I really like both of these quotes, so I'm probably going to reread them a few times for sure. But I think that the people that have made the deepest impressions on me in my life have generally been very, on some level, they've been very humble people. Because the more you kind of understand about things, I think the more humble you become.
Well,
So
I think I'm very proud of you for saying that and gratified because I hoped to transmit that thought to you because somehow it's undignified and a little bit silly for a mortal man to be vaunting anything before his fellow man or before God, saying, I am great. Or even this concept, USA, USA. I mean, I can be proud in a humble way, grateful that the gifts we have received, like God bless America, from sea to shining sea. We do have a beautiful country, beautiful people, many wonderful Americans, but mostly the best are the simple people with
yeah,
simple good values. And this tinsel Hollywood lights and stars and icons, they're not really. It's the saints who are the true stars and icons. It's almost as if this modern society has reversed and attempted to overcome centuries of a tradition of humble nobility with false, superficial pride.
Mm. Well, truly profound education breeds humility. So I guess we need to keep going towards rolling on towards the end of our show.
Well, Michael's question, maybe.
Yeah, we'll do a few questions. Christopher, wouldn't you say now in 2025 there's more similarities between the United States and Europe? I like Michael's questions because Michael has been here a few times. So
I think
shout out to Michael.
he's in
Yeah, he's from
Catania. He's in Sicily.
I think Michael, maybe he's Italian. Salve, Michael. Tutto bene. Okay, would they say there's more similarities between the United States and Europe? I mean, that's such a huge question and such a big topic to open up. But I think that there's similarities and differences. I think politically, both countries are starting to, not both countries, obviously Europe is not a country. Europe is a continent, but politically both United States and Europe are starting to dismantle the last 80 years of whatever the last 80 years was post World War II. So I think that both United States and Europe are going through a very similar process right now. So I don't know if that was what your question was talking about, like politically or
Well, Chris, I'm going to put
socially.
up. We've got some sharp critics here, and
that's good. That's what we want. No,
okay,
that's
let's
what
see what
we
we're
don't
going
want.
to
We don't want to be putting people to sleep. So, nice. Thank you so much for this. I'm listening from Estonia. Yes.
And we should
Estonia.
maybe ask, maybe do they fear some type of Russian invasion? But
That's what the first thing that came to my mind. I mean, yeah,
uh,
that's one of the things that you have to ask about if you do kind of have a certain agreement regarding Ukraine. Does the next step then become, the Baltic states, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia? I have a good friend here actually who's from Lithuania, and he speaks Russian. He's completely bilingual, Russian and English. But from his perspective, and people in Lithuania, they're very anti. Yeah, they just do not. They don't see anything positive in the Russian government, the Putin government, and they basically kind of, if you try to even start to say, well, maybe if there's peace in Ukraine, then there will be kind of a more stable future, and so on and so forth. They say, well, that's crazy. Like, everybody knows that as soon as like this war is over and they don't have to, the Russian troops will not be tied down in Ukraine anymore, then they'll just start to send them over to the Baltic states. So that's their perspective. That's just the perspective of a regular person who's my age or maybe a bit younger.
so,
But
Crystal,
that's kind of their general
Crystal, you could
how
tell
they
us
see
if,
it. Yeah, yeah. You
and
can
then
get the
Antonia,
Estonian perspective.
Antonia, with whom I have traveled, she's a very devout and very smart
It's
woman.
positive to be patriotic. Yeah,
Um,
I
but
agree.
I don't think I said it was not. I think I just
Yeah,
said that an indiscriminate patriotism, like we do use the phrase "my country, right or wrong," when you say the word wrong, if you truly mean that you're wrong, you should work to undo that wrong if you truly love your country.
yeah,
And
I agree with that.
there's types and types of influence and of imperialism. And if there's an exploitative imperialism, it probably should be changed, made more
Yeah,
just. But these are all okay. Here's Antonia again, the
Hollywood
Hollywood
stars are all
Democrats.
Democrats.
Okay, Antonia, essentially, I agree with you, and I think you know
Mm,
that. But what I'm a little afraid of is less profound, good, and Christian patriotism, and in a more shallow and dangerous populism. And we will see step by step where the lines are drawn. And then
yeah.
here, Patty Leather.
Europeans have become communist and godless.
That's a kind of dramatic summary of an indictment, you might say. And there has been.
Yeah. I mean, not the 25% Muslim population of many countries.
Oh man,
Just a joke.
I
That's
didn't.
just a joke.
No. The strange thing is, I don't know, I'm not going to go there. It is true, however, that the post-Christian view, secularized human without anything sacred, in some way is even beyond the pale of what we might call Islam, which still retains a concept of the sacred. If that makes, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think that there is a certain there's still, everybody naturally has a yearning for some type of spiritual truth, even if they say that they're completely like materialistic. So I think even if Europeans generally say like I'm not Christian, that doesn't mean that they're just totally, they're searching for something still. I think everybody is either searching for something or they have found
Okay.
something.
I
So
mean, and I think that's compatible with what Jesus taught too.
yeah,
And Palestine in his time was filled with other nations, and it describes Jerusalem filled with ethnicities at the time of his crucifixion. Simon from Cyrene, the
yeah.
Roman soldiers. So Jesus was dealing probably in a number of languages. Probably did know some Rome from some
At
Latin.
least Greek for sure.
Sure, I think it's almost certain, and
Yeah,
Aramaic, but I think he knew some. And then
and Hebrew probably too.
there's descriptions of the wise men coming really from Persia, I believe. We think that
Hmm.
that's, and they would therefore be Iranians, and they
Hmm.
came to Bethlehem. They were seeking a king, and they were wise men because they studied the stars. They would have been received with respect.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, if all respect diminishes and we all go at each other's throats, I think that we'll be very miserable. And
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I don't think that.
here in Kazakhstan, there's Christians, there's Muslims, there's you know a lot of atheists from the Soviet Union that just never kind of Soviet Union was officially atheistic country, but there is, I would say, kind of a respect at least. Like, I think that it's possible to have respect even if there's it's not like you have to eliminate all Muslims from the society. That's that's my view. I don't think that you need to necessarily say, you know, our will never rest until our society is 100% this, purely Christian, because that you have to actually like let people make their own decisions. Like you can't force people to do anything that they don't want to do. So um, I think again
Well,
with the there's many people on the Muslim side that want to force everybody to become Muslim, and you see that through all kinds of
yeah.
things
Well,
happening in the Middle East, and yeah, but that's not, to me, that's not the right attitude. Like everybody needs to become this. They need to find what the truth is for themselves.
well, I do feel that the best way for us to behave is to become as light and as charitable and reasonable as we can be, so that even an atheist who thinks he's so balanced and wise and would say, well, this person who may have this silly belief in a unreal spiritual realm does nevertheless seem thoughtful, kind, reasonable. And I feel that that is the tradition we received from the first 2 or 3 centuries, when the Apostle Paul in Book of Acts goes place to place, speaks with the Athenians, say, I come to tell you about a God that even you call the unknown God. And in each place, they attempt to do things in a charitable way so that they are known as people who love one another and support one another. And this is the sort of other side of the coin of the idea of the fallen world. What's the other side of the fallen world? This is a fallen world, I used to say. Well, it's redeemed, or it's saved.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's like someone who's drowning, and you reach out and you say,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, I'm gonna help you out so you don't drown."
Mm-hmm.
So, if a person is completely caught up in some obsession, you say, well, you don't just say, I'm going to just execute you. You say,
Mm-hmm.
so,
I think, yeah, I think if you look at history, something like my my screen got turned. Something like the Renaissance in Italy, right? Like it was this kind of society that was not completely atheistic or completely secular. It was a spiritually vibrant society. They were trying to express some spiritual truths, and they had a complete outpouring of all of this art and literature and architecture. And so you always love to talk about the Renaissance as a kind of, or maybe you like the period before that, even earlier, um but yeah, I think that it's not just in this hypothetical realm of like a fallen world and a redeemed world, but there's also some periods where we've maybe been a bit closer to that, and then others where we've been a bit as humanity, right?
Okay. So I would agree, and I would say, therefore, the challenge in each of our lives, and I'm getting a little older now, and my life is verging towards nightfall. But
Ah,
well,
you got another.
and I'm suddenly coughing. Okay, but still, in this context of a eternal view, we have the opportunity of each single life to do what we can to have our own renaissance, rebirth of faith, hope, love, and of art and harmony between families and in cities and between nations. And there's always the chance, too, that misery can come upon us and passionate hatreds and
Hmm.
wars. And I think if you read through the scriptures and you read through the New Testament, you'll see this question is repeatedly, how do we in our time follow Christ? And what is John B saying, Chris? I can't read it.
Gospel readings yesterday talked about Noah's flood. They found fresh water below the surface of the Black Sea. Does Chris know anything about this? I do. I have read about the freshwater layer below the bottom of the Black Sea. There's if you get down to a certain level, if you go down far enough, it's like salt water, salt water, salt water, and then at the very bottom there's a layer of fresh water. And so that's why they found many well-preserved shipwrecks, for example, in the
Right.
bottom
And
of the Black Sea.
we were once thinking of making a map of shipwrecks, which might have carried not just gold or oil or wine in those big vases, but maybe books. And I think in one or two cases, Robert Ballard had gone, who's the man who found the
Mm-hmm.
Titanic.
Yeah, yeah. We
He'd started,
loved Robert Ballard.
yeah, we met Robert Ballard.
Yes,
And
that's it's a super interesting person
and
for sure.
and
Yeah,
and we thought if we could get a submersible and go down to the bottom of the Black Sea into this layer where some Roman ship may be carrying a copy of the New Testament or some
yeah.
writings of Tertullian or Augustine. I'm sorry. We just thought we might find
That's
manuscripts
interesting.
that
But
had
then,
otherwise been lost.
yeah, there's also kind of this idea that it was a big freshwater lake at one point, and there was, the Mediterranean did not get high enough to go through this Bosporus and go into the Black Sea, and so there was just a freshwater lake. And then at one point, there was some type of earthquake or some shift happened of the land, and then all of this salt water poured in, but it didn't actually replace this lowest level. So that's a really interesting. I have to read a little bit more about that. Thank you,
Okay, we'll
John.
come back to that. Yeah. What else do we have?
Here's an interesting one. Israel is trying to close the Armenian church that has been in Jerusalem for 1,700 years. That should be front page news. Patty Leather. Maybe you should tell that to the Secretary of Defense.
Chris, I think that's not a good remark right now.
It's a free country.
Well, that's a
Well,
nice
you're in a
thing.
free country. I don't know about if I
Kazakhstan.
I gotta be careful, but
Well, what time? Actually, now we come to something I've thought of a lot. It's
but
midnight, isn't it?
we were gonna get into Pete Hegseth and JD Vance a little bit more if
Okay,
you
well, what time is it for you?
it's 12:07, it's midnight. So
How do you feel?
I feel all right. I
Yeah,
can
we'll
talk a
go
bit
for a
more.
few more minutes.
Yeah.
It's midnight in Almaty, and we're trying to assess the way toward harmony in a situation of war in the Middle East, a war in Ukraine, of a cultural war throughout Europe and in the United States, of a new regime that's come into power, which does have many very impressive achievements in 31 days, and a pope named Francis who seems to be possibly passing away, but he may recover. The latest
Mhm.
reports are that his pneumonia is being lessened and the fever is down. So, in this context, we're always seeking solutions to some of the great problems that could cause misery and reduce faith. This is our
Mhm.
purpose. Okay, what's this say, Chris?
Antonio, good point. I don't. Yeah, I think what triggered Putin in 2022, Americans had a missile that could hit Moscow within 7 minutes from Ukraine.
So, John is making the point we have to understand what each person's perspective is, like we were asking that person in Estonia what their perspective is, and what each Antonia, you have, is that Antonia? Yeah, your perspective, Chris's perspective. What's Putin's perspective? He says the
Mhm.
Americans have a missile in 7 minutes and they want Ukraine to declare they're not neutral, but they're part of NATO and they're going to
Mhm.
be taking weapons and putting in missiles along their border. And I've told them for 30 years that if you do that, I'll be very frightened, I'll be suspicious, and you don't respond to me. You don't respond to me. And therefore, that's what John seems to be saying, that he thinks that mentality led him toward the invasion in February of 2022, which is now
Mhm.
3 years ago. Like in 3 days, the 24th of February, it's been 3 whole years of slaughter.
Mhm.
Okay,
I'm curious about Patty Leather's comments. He's some interesting comments, but
you can show one or two. It's okay. We're it's a free country. I don't know what they are though, so I'm hesitant.
no. Let's well, so he had that comment about the Armenian church in Jerusalem.
Well, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Okay, read this.
USA is another Zionist war. Until you understand that, you won't have a clue what's going on. USA is another Zionist war. I don't. But
Well, I mean, I think I understand what he's driving at. He thinks there's an influence by certain financial, cultural, religious interests that are interested in supporting Israel, and that
Mhm.
they maneuver the news and maneuver the politics in that direction.
Mhm.
And if you don't understand those maneuverings, you're missing the motivation of many decisions. That's, I think, his point.
Trump works for evil. He may be the Antichrist. Strong words from Patty Leather.
Well, um,
Israel is the problem. Patty Leather. Well, okay, let's get another. I mean, yeah, that's one perspective. It's we're
well,
gonna
let's
yeah. It's
then
also
don't we
yeah.
have a map? Do we have a map of?
Yeah, we do. We do. We have a map of Israel and Gaza. Musk is a great person, Antonio. Musk is a great person, and he's a genius on top of it. They're revealing all the fraud and corruption in all the American agencies, mostly USAID. You and I have talked about USAID.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I wouldn't take God's role or the role of Christ as a final judge of any man's soul, but I think Antonia has decided that Musk is a great person. Uh,
Well,
I do think
I
he's
think
working night and day, but
yeah, it's he's an interesting figure for sure.
He's a figure. He's a historic figure.
Yeah, I don't
You,
know. I think time will tell. Let's just say that. I'm not going to completely agree with this statement. I'm not going to say he's a bad person right now, for
he's not.
sure.
I would love to. He seems to regard the life that he has as a human being as a vortex. We would consider it the soul, but um, anyway,
I think time will tell. I think really time will tell what
I would
is
ask what
happening with
I
all
mean.
of these.
We
Yeah.
nobody can really.
We
Um,
have to see. We have to kind of take a step back, see what's happening in the next few weeks because so much has already happened in the last few weeks. And then we need to kind of
I
reassess and analyze.
I just want to ask one slight question
Mhm.
on the personal side. I met Steve Bannon years ago. It was 10
Yeah,
years ago.
that's
It was 2014 in Rome. We had a dinner together and we're talking about I was going to write some articles for Breitbart, and I never did. And then Bannon, after that, got associated with Trump. We didn't even know Trump was running for president in 2014. And that was the year that the whole situation in Ukraine broke up, with
yeah,
Maidan,
Maidan.
the departure of the president, and then
Mhm.
the beginning of the struggle over Donbass with Ukrainian army fighting against sort of Russia-supported rebel forces. So that the war does go back to 2014. We know that very well. And I
Mhm.
don't know if you remember this. We were on an airplane. I think was it 2017 in July? I think it was. In July, it was when that Malaysian aircraft was shot down, that passenger plane.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving Moscow and going to Istanbul that very day, and we were over Ukraine, and we were within 100 miles of that other aircraft
Yeah.
on another flight on a vector crossing, and that other flight was shot down. I always wondered if they hadn't intended to shoot us down. I
Yeah, I
mean,
think I remember you telling me that actually,
yeah,
or calling me. Yeah. Yeah.
maybe you weren't with me on that trip. Okay, so
This is
what's
a good
this?
comment. Many uneducated people became saints if your knowledge is induced from God. Jesus never picked philosophers, he chose fishermen.
Mhm. Well, it was
Simple
sort of
people. I agree with that.
what my father used to tell me was that the entire spectrum is in a kind of even level before God, whether the genius professor, scientist, or the washerwoman who has a basket of laundry. Before God, the goodness of each of their souls, the humility, the generosity is what is their value. And obviously, their accomplishments in this world are different, but the washerwoman could be closer. And that's why the church was a kind of a vast gathering of souls. And you could
Mm,
see smart politicians, John Kennedy, and you could see, uh, you know, uh, mother of 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 children, and the washerwoman, all in the same church. We were not
mm,
supposed to have classes inside our churches.
mm,
It was a vast community on pilgrimage toward eternity.
mhm.
That's what he told me, so I'm telling you.
Nice. Low key. Christopher, please educate yourself on the role the US played in Ukraine. It's not organic like you're thinking.
Um, I
Maybe,
think
yeah. I mean, I would be willing to read anything about the role that the US. I mean, I also do think that I would agree that the US supported this, power transition or whatever, this overthrow of
well, I mean,
Yanukovych.
I think what he
But
means.
Yeah.
First of all,
I don't
you
think it was completely organic, and I'm definitely not an expert, but I don't know who is an expert. So I'm trying to state my own opinion just because I need to I do need to educate myself, but I'm trying to educate myself through this whole process of even doing this, of
well,
doing these podcasts.
Saint Augustine said, "I learn through writing."
Yeah.
It means he wrote down something, looks at it, and said, "Wait a minute, that's not right. I just wrote it, but it's not right.
Yeah.
I have to go deeper." And I think a teacher has the same experience. I learned through teaching. You say something and you say, "Well, that's not sufficient. I just taught it as a partial fact, but I need to complement it with another one." And I
Yeah.
think Loki, is that Loki?
Loki, yeah.
Isn't that the name of a Nordic god? The
Yeah,
kind of
the Norse god Loki. Yeah, he's the trickster.
I don't know if you were using, but it's not spelled this. It's Loki. But
Yeah.
Loki may be surprised to know that we've meditated a great deal on the possible actions and influence of the United States in all phases of the last 100 years.
Yeah.
In the First World War, the Second World War, the Soviet Union, the Communist Revolution, the Spanish Revolution, etc. And in Ukraine, obviously, there was a principle sort of Western strategic thought that the only important thing to do was to keep Germany separate from Russia.
Mm.
And in that issue, because the technology and engineering of Russia, if applied to the vast resources, of Germany, if applied to the vast resources of Russia, could have made that combination the leading power in the world. And the Ukraine,
The world island.
well, we're back to that, but the Ukraine was always kind of a hinge point. We looked at it in our first conversation. And the Americans always thought of it as something that they could benefit from influencing. If that's what Loki means, he thinks occurs, I think we know that he's correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the United States, if you look at our last 100 or 150 years, it's a lot of interventions of many different places around the world. So I definitely do not whitewash American history. I think America has many questionable episodes of, especially, in our own part of the world, Latin America, and
Yeah.
so, but I also don't think that I think Russia and the United States have a similar tendency of intervening in countries that they say that they believe that countries should be kind of autonomous and self-determining and allowed to follow their own path of development the way that they see fit. But both the United States and Russia in the last 100 years have had probably dozens of examples where they do not allow other nations to just simply follow the path that they want to follow without some type of intervention. So I think both the United States and Russia are guilty of that. I don't think anyone would.
I mean,
maybe people would disagree with that, but that's my view. That's my perspective.
With so many things we could talk about. I was going to think of China just now and the emerging China, but let's go forward because we had a couple of slides that would animate the discussion, and we can conclude it. I want you to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Well.
Oh my God. Oh.
Okay. Here's the Gaza war.
And Chris, we're up to about almost 150 people are right now live watching us.
Great.
Later, this will be on the internet. We
I
get a
heard that
few
we were
hundred.
getting into the.
We get a few hundred viewers. We are not Tucker Carlson with 400 million. We are not Joe Rogan. We are one of the smallest podcasts in the world. I think we may be the smallest. You and I are the most humble podcast in the world. So, but we have
Oh
this
man.
small group of people, and I think we are learning as we do this. And by
They
6 months
they
from
heard we
now,
were talking about Ukraine and Elon Musk, and so they switched over from Joe Rogan to
well,
hear what we have to say.
I do think bit by bit we're gathering our forces, and as we look toward the new papacy, and as we watch this sort of globalizing effort that Trump is engaged in, anyway, I think it will become interesting, and we do have
Oh
an
yeah.
idea of where we're going, but it's hard to get there. Let's go.
Well, so okay, so we had Ukraine. Here's Ukraine, which we spent a long time on. So now, just quick map of the.
Oh wait, this is the Riviera property that was we acquired now by the United States, and he thinks it's going to happen. And
Yes, this is where we're gonna be. We're gonna have some Trump hotels.
yeah, it's a kind of Miami Beach East.
Yes, that's right. It's gonna be great.
Mar-a-Lago will fit nicely. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe up near where Gaza City is.
Oh, geez.
Well, okay, but what is wrong with the idea? What's missing? Well,
I don't know. I mean,
one thing.
I
Wait.
think
What a preliminary thought. Besides the fact that these are generations and generations have trod.
yeah,
In other words, people have fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, and grandmothers who lived here, were born here. There's a connection. So there does come a moment when all that can be removed and a beautiful hotel put in, but there'll be a sense that this was our family home, and that seems to be ignored completely. It's not in the equation. But I would also say that that blue part out there is water, right? It's called the
yes,
Mediterranean Sea. And there's
yes,
actually two lines going out into the water, right?
yes.
And
That's
those
the
lines are used
maritime territory of Gaza,
they're used
I
to
guess.
measure what is under the water being the property of the Gaza area, and below that is Egypt, and above that is Israel, and then further up is Lebanon.
Correct.
And what's under that water?
A lot of oil and
And
gas.
and gas.
Yeah.
And it's already started, I don't think off of Gaza, but up off of Israel.
Israel has begun to develop their
Okay, and
natural gas
when you
field.
say a lot, how much is a lot?
Well, I wish that I had a number off the top of my head, but it's something comparable to uh like a big portion of what they're getting right now from Russia. And also, yeah. So some percentage of what they
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that we're talking of tens of billions of dollars?
yeah, I guess so. I guess I
Okay,
am.
and
Yeah.
are you telling me that just before that money is gotten by drilling for it, they want to remove everybody who's there who might become millionaires if they just stayed?
I guess I'm telling you
Well,
that.
I mean, how could people not feel that they are being cheated?
Well, I think that you bring up a very interesting point. And it's something that even I haven't really thought about until now, but I've thought about it in terms of, because before, when we were writing about Lebanon and stuff, I did a couple of articles talking about that
Okay, so you
agreement
have
where,
to make clear that you visited Lebanon. We've talked with many people. We met the patriarch of the
yeah,
Maronites, etc. And we traveled to southern
we've been to
Lebanon.
Lebanon. We have
Okay.
not been to Israel. We may never be
No, well,
invited to
I
Israel
visited
after
Israel.
this. Oh, you
Yeah,
did? Yeah, that's right. You were in Israel.
two
Yeah.
times. But what I'm saying, Chris, is at the very least, every citizen of Gaza, according to their passport, no matter where they go, if they go to, Africa or
Mhm.
China, or if they go to Canada, I still believe they must have attached as a family heritage the proceeds from the oil and gas for their family forever.
Wow.
Don't you think?
I completely, well, I think that that would be fair. I
But
don't think it'll
if they didn't,
happen, but
but if they don't have that, don't you think it's a theft?
I do.
I mean,
I was going to say,
it's just
yeah,
5 years away. It's like you waiting for me to die in 5 years and receive my millions,
yeah, right.
and then
Exactly.
someone
All
else
those
comes
millions.
along and says, "No, yeah, I'm going to bankrupt your father and take everything
Yeah,
before he gives it to you."
right. It's just like all those millions that you're going to give me in 5 or 10 years.
I think we
Yeah.
should make clear that I actually do not have even one.
I think we
So,
should make that very clear. But yeah,
in
no,
fact,
but no, but I was gonna say, like when we were getting into the weeds of Ukraine and like the last, 3 decades
oh,
and
well, let's
how,
go back to that map. Let's go back for 1 second
but
to
I just wanted to say you can't even compare this Ukraine history with this Holy Land history. It's so much more Byzantine and
okay, but
labyrinthine
I
and
agree completely.
and
So,
I think you and I know less about, well, I would say I personally feel like I know more of the history of the Ukraine conflict and just the region as a whole, but we still, I think, need to try to familiarize ourselves with it more, because otherwise these decisions just kind of get made, and
well,
there's no accountability whatsoever of
theoretically,
anybody who makes decisions.
in a democracy, we're a representative democracy. We have a vote. We choose someone to go and represent us, but each of us should know something about the issues that are being voted on by our representatives. And yet, most of this does not occur. The democracy does not function. It ends up being a small group of people, often under tremendous financial pressure, making decisions on these issues. But still, by the fact that we are podcasters and journalists and that I write a magazine about the Vatican, we can still try to research and come to a just and fair, just as you tried to justly cut the cake with your brother. I think
Yeah.
we have that right, but I don't know if
We have
people
the
will
right.
agree.
I think we have the right to inform ourselves and to form our own opinions. So even if
So
our opinion is based on based on incomplete information,
okay, but
everyone's opinion, even
but go
politicians.
back again, just to Ukraine. Why I say go back? The blue area of the Azov Sea is that sea on the lower right, which is
Yeah,
surrounded, and
and that
there's
has
Crimea.
very
That
large
is
deposits as well.
very large deposits of oil and gas that haven't yet been tapped.
Yep.
And of course, that whole sea is half Russian. Even in the old days, was half
It
Russian,
was.
half Ukraine.
Yeah.
Now it's become a Russian lake. So the
Correct.
Russians will make, but if the Russians make an agreement, uh, the other thing that has to, I mean, finances are very important. China has already gotten, I think, 5% of Ukraine. They've bought it. Some people think they could cancel those contracts if they were Ukrainian patriots, but China has paid good money for those. But I think Monsanto and other big agricultural companies, Cargill, I think they
Mhm.
have large tracks, but I'm not sure
Mhm.
exactly where. This is my ignorance. But
Mhm.
this is a contested area that's going to make money in many ways for food production because it's the Black Earth. All that whole area in the basin of the Don River, which is
Mhm.
where over on the
Really
right side.
right. Yeah, it's really
And
right where that almost near where the front line is. Yeah.
so it's money that's also at stake. Contracts for minerals, contracts for oil, contracts for gas, contracts for agriculture. And a lot of the poor Ukrainians whom we met are not even related to these contracts. They're
Mhm.
living still as they lived 100 years ago. Then
Yeah.
the younger ones come to Kiev and they're starting to become educated, but they're going in some way not to participate in
Mhm.
the coming wealth. It's mostly going to go, I think, to big international corporations and big governments. So
Mhm.
in my own heart, I feel they too. I think the Ukrainians could be wealthy, but I don't think they're going to be. So I think that's another tragedy. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Good points. Very good points. We got to start to wrap it up, but maybe we'll leave this for next time.
I look at these.
These are just the, two.
I look at these gentlemen and I think these are young fellows. They're not too much older than you are.
Yeah, 84 and 80.
But so Vance is
they're I've read a bit about them in the last few days, and I think again you just kind of have to wait and see what happens. But there's some interesting, they're both military, so that's.
And Vance converted to Catholicism. He wrote the beautiful book, Hillbilly Elegies, about his boyhood. He was in a very evangelical Protestant background, filled with a sense of God and Christ, but also poverty. And he went into the Marines. He was a Marine.
Yeah.
Just like my uncle who's behind me here in the picture, and my father. Your grandfather was a Marine.
Yeah.
I've got the picture. I don't know if I should show it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
This, I think, may be almost historic here. Do you see this? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right?
Yeah, let's take off the,
Okay.
I'll put I'll even remove myself.
Okay, so this is me. But this is a platoon of Marines in 1947 at Paris Island after the Second World War. And my father is that man right there, William Moynihan. And that man on the end is George C. Scott. Okay? Who was the actor.
George C. Scott was a famous, he was the great, he was in Patton and.
Yeah, and when I was born, George C. Scott wrote a letter to my father saying, "I'm glad you had a son." So, so I have a kind of U.S. Marine heritage, and I respect Vance for that. And I do respect. Let's see, what are we doing here, Chris?
I'm not doing anything.
Okay, so and Hickseth. So
yeah. Well, we have some raging debate in the comments, which I think is great. I think that there should be
put
a healthy debate.
Put a couple of
let's see.
Well,
let's see.
I mean, I guess I could go back to my phrase, "It's a fallen world."
Here we go.
In other words, these gentlemen.
No, I think
these gentlemen are wonderful men who are Trump's top choices to run. Actually, Vance may be his successor. He could be the next president. And Hegseth is running the American military now. And it looks like I read yesterday 7 generals and admirals will be jettisoned today or tomorrow, who have been too sort of woke and not serious and honorable enough. But Antonia, what does she say?
Antonia says Trump's idea is brilliant, and it would be great for Israel not to be threatened by them every day. Okay. So the idea of turning Gaza into Riviera of the Middle East. Okay. I just don't know if I can agree with that, but we have to keep going. Okay. Patty Leather, this is sick. Israel's been committing genocide and the world just watches. This is worse than what they claimed happened in World War II. Again. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first reaction. It's October 7th until now is a year and 4 months. The seeming number killed in Gaza seems to be 60,000. The Hamas group is embedded in Gaza, but of those 60,000 people, many were women and children.
Yeah, I think it's like 30% or more are children under the age of.
So several minutes. So 30% of it would be 18,000 children. Now,
Yeah.
But
So we got some pro-Trump. Basically, I feel like this debate kind of can be boiled down in a way to people that think, that the Israelis are kind of defending themselves and they need to be able to live peacefully and not be attacked in the way that they were on October 6th. And then the other side
7th.
says, was it October? Yeah, okay, October 7th. And then the other side is the people that say, yeah, they've killed, thousands of children and basically razed the whole area. And I think that that's just a fact. So I don't know what.
I think we cannot.
I don't know. I don't even know what you can.
We start with.
I think that that's wrong for sure. Like that, the fact that they have the destruction that has occurred since that time of Gaza, I think that that's wrong. Yeah. So anyway, but
okay,
we should get deeper into it maybe at a later.
Yeah,
but it's a very tough topic for us to tackle, I think. So.
I mean, I start with the very simple principle of not looking at what everyone is arguing about and just saying, here a child, there another child, there an Israeli, there's a Palestinian, and I say, I'm sad. I'm in sorrow. I feel like Christ wept when he saw Jerusalem, and I weep, saying, kids in October last year with their little backpacks and stuff, and maybe they were, eventually going to be raised as some sort of terrorist or something, but shame on Trump and Israel. Yes, I would say there's a shame that humanity commits terrible crimes, and little children who were going to go to school and we're going to learn to read and write and play kickball and play soccer. Their houses are bombed. Their lives are uprooted. They're refugees. They're probably maybe never going to return. The world has changed. Yeah. It's social engineering. Little people get caught up in these things, and big people take the decisions. And Christopher and I are observers. We're not taking any decisions. We're watching, we're commenting, and we're lamenting. We're sad, and we're trying to find a possible
decisions.
Very difficult. We just so beyond the lamentation of the deaths and of course every death of an Israeli soldier, etc., is tragic. So we ought to find a way to peace, and to do that, I think we require prayer, almost a divine intervention. But okay, now and then we bring in, who's this character?
This is our old pal. Well, not really our pal, but we've both met him personally.
In Moscow.
Very intriguing but odd, intellectual, and what's the word? He's a pot stirrer. He's someone who likes to really provoke and stir the pot. He's a kind of ideologue. He's talks about the Ruski Mir, Alexander Dugin, and
what's Ruski Mir?
Ruski Mir is this idea that Russian cultural. It's the Russian cultural space. I would describe it.
So Ruski is Russian. Mir is
world.
world, this Russian
Yeah.
world. So,
Yeah.
I should explain, when we go anywhere and we travel and we meet, we try to talk to almost anybody and gather information and gather ideas. Part of our attempt is to understand the Russian mind and the currents inside. And so there's one that's regarded as powerful, but other people tell us it's not powerful at all. But this man
Mhm.
has received a certain reputation as the kind of the mind behind Putin,
Yeah.
the philosopher behind Putin,
Yeah.
who speaks this Ruski Mir is the idea that Russian world and the way of being Russian,
Yeah. It's
we,
qualitatively different from
and it should not
Western.
be disappear from the world, and that explains why they saw Ukraine as a critical cornerstone for the eventual defeat of the Russian world, and that had to be stopped. And this is it's got a militaristic view that's presented. This is sort of the military and ideology strategist of
Yeah.
the Russian national vision.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But I don't think he identifies as a Christian.
no, I don't. And I think when we met, I said,
He
"Have you
identifies
departed?"
as a Eurasianist, and he's
I know,
also
but
somewhat
you
of
you
a.
remember, Chris, I said, "Have you departed from the faith?"
I don't
Alexander.
remember that, but it's
Well,
just yeah.
anyway, I did say that because and I still don't think he gave me a clear answer. I think he said he's imbued with the great traditions of Russian Orthodoxy, but he no longer attends church or no longer
Mhm.
is orthodox in his acceptance of the creed.
He's a bit of an esotericist.
Yes, exactly. So then the one thing I remember him saying to me as he responded was, "I'm not like you, and we are not like you Americans."
Mm,
And I said, "Well, what do you mean? How are you different?" He said, "Our minds are different." He said, "You believe you are an individual and that all of you are seeking individual pleasure, individual fulfillment,
mm,
individual freedom." And I
mm,
said, "Okay, and what about yourself?" He
mm,
said, "We have common mind."
mm. Wow, interesting.
And what does that mean, Chris, to you? What does a common mind mean?
Like a hive mind,
Yeah. Okay. So
like
then another thing,
like ants in a hive.
yeah. So they have a common purpose. Maybe each one of them doesn't matter if they die or suffer, but if the whole group survives.
Yeah.
Okay. Second thing is his daughter was a young journalist, quite a pretty girl. You can find her on the internet,
Hmm.
Daria Dugan. And he and Daria were at some type of a cookout one afternoon about 2 years ago. And she said, "Can I take your car back? I'm going to leave early." And he said, "Okay, I'll come back with a friend." And she went to the car, started it up, and the car blew up.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he looked over his head at the explosion, walked over, and he saw the dead body of his daughter.
But they were probably targeting him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or unless you believe that they were so cruel that to destroy him emotionally and spiritually, they decided to kill his daughter, to make him suffer.
Yeah. Was
Anyway,
that thought to be the Ukrainian
yes, it was thought to be Ukrainians, but who knows about these things? But it was
special
alleged
ops or something?
special ops in Ukraine inside Russia that killed his daughter.
Hmm.
Okay, who knows if it was, because there's always a third or fourth hypothesis, just as you like if you watch these films by, Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Someone evil will get someone good to do something evil so that it looks like the good person did it.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Double and triple crosses. Okay. Well, now we get into some other stuff, but uh this was some old pictures of us in Ukraine.
So it was 2017.
Yeah, this is probably one of like either that same day that we met with Dugan or 1 or 2 days before or after that. So anyway, we should probably wrap this up though. Yeah. So, and then it all kind of starts to, yeah. If you go back to even this time of the last Romanovs, a lot of the chaos that ensued from them being assassinated and their family being killed, that's still playing out today in some sense, I guess. And then, yeah. So that's all that I have for today.
Okay, so let's just state for the record what we intend to do.
Well, I guess we just need to keep following things the way we've been following them. And
okay, what's on the agenda then? Well, I would say in Rome, we have the Pope Francis with all his complexity. We have Archbishop Vigano excommunicated, the health of the Pope, his departure, eventually, the selection of a new successor to Peter, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, and the desire maybe that there be a restoration of certain beliefs and practices so that there be a renaissance of the church, and it would be a factor in taking whatever is good and great in human technology and making sure that there's a spirit of Christian humanism, of the Holy Spirit, somehow, humility, we might call it, that would protect us from new totalitarianisms. And then we will watch closely. Oh, what's Patty say?
Pope Francis is the only world leader critical of Israel. He should be remembered for that.
Well, I would say Francis is critical of violent. I think he would hope that Israel would have safety and prosperity, but not arrogance and cruelty. And
but I also agree that it does take a certain amount of maybe you could, courage or.
Absolutely. Yeah. Francis actually is courageous in ways that he's not given credit for, both with regard to the war in Ukraine and with regard to the situation in Israel. Yeah. And it's going to make it difficult for him to get along with the Trump. But what else do we have here?
Gonzalo Suarez.
He's in São Paulo, I think, in Brazil.
Oh, nice. Muito bem. Bem-vindo. For those interested on the subject, here's a suggestion. The USA and the New World Order, a debate between Olavo de Carvalho and Alexander Dugin. Okay, we'll check that out. Thanks for that.
Okay. Tip. All right. We will do that. So we'll follow very closely, as my profession requires, the leadership of the Catholic Church in the Vatican, where I visited and stayed in Doma Santa Marta and met Pope Benedict, met Pope Francis. You met Pope Francis as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You had a nice conversation with him. And what is our goal? Our goal is that Chris and I continue to have a good relationship because we were drifting apart because he's thousands of miles away. So we proposed a podcast because week after week we would say, let's make a phone call, but we wouldn't do it.
Yeah, we would do sometimes, but.
Yeah, but this has actually been interesting, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What does Nigro say?
Dugin's daughter's tragedy recalls, again, Godfather 3. When they come for you, they'll come for what you love most. Something to that effect, spoken by Don Michael Corleone. Nice.
I mean, it's so sad. I feel a certain compassion for Dugin to have lost his daughter. People may criticize me for that because they think he's a kind of a fascist in some way. I saw him, I think our strategy is to be people who can some way contribute to possible healing and harmony in the future as all sorts of plans and projects proceed forward for the total redevelopment of the world, redevelopment of Gaza. It's basically a redevelopment project, and redevelopment really of the human person, human nature, and that requires changing education and changing laws. We want to represent the deepest, best tradition of the West. We're going to defend that, and I'm trying to mold you to take whatever you can that you find good from that, which I took also from my father and got into this position somehow. He encouraged me to go to Rome. And then I thought to myself, I'll have him born in Rome, so he'll always have a contact with Rome. So you can blame me perhaps
Yeah, right.
for your rootlessness in some ways, but you're deeply rooted in a way that many people are not. You're rooted in the great virtues and principles of our tradition, which are prudence, faith, hope, charity, prudence,
Temperance,
fortitude,
justice.
and justice. Justice, perhaps above all, which you have also testified to with your relations with your brother. Let's
Yeah, well, I remember we would walk to school and you would quiz me on the virtues, so I still remember that at least.
So what I for now forget, you remember.
Yeah,
All right.
You actually did that, so that was good.
All
Good
right.
job.
Thank you, Christopher. All right. Oh, I wrote a letter to you on your birth. I wrote a letter to you, and I explained what I thought about giving you your name, Christopher, and also what I hoped for in your life. I don't know where that letter is right now. I hand wrote it.
We'll have to delve into the archive and see where it is.
All right. Thank you to everybody. I know we wander a little bit.
We went super long today, but
yeah. And
it was fun.
Oh, should they hit the like button or just let it go, Chris?
Absolutely. Hit the like button and tell your friends and family that this is a extremely heated and thrilling and engrossing conversation that's happening every Friday here.
Midnight in Almaty.
That's right.
That's
right. And we'll try and keep it going. We'll try and be back with more next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Chris, how do I even?
I'll end it.
Do you know how to do it?
Yeah. Bye-bye.